I always say that drag artists actually don't understand drag until they understand the responsibility that comes with that. There's so much responsibility that comes with that. There's so much platform that comes with that. There's so much access and opportunity that comes with that. And what I have seen over the years is when I first started drag, I was having a good time. I'm still having a good time. But it wasn't until I understood, when I started seeing that, again, society hates us, literally hates us, are terrified of us. If I have that power to terrify you, then I have the power to actually do something else. And when I see that I have a little bit of power, I like to explore that power.
My name is Naomi motherfucking Dix. I am a drag queen. And honey, when you want to come and play on the playground with me, you have to understand that as a drag queen, honey, I never just come to play, I come to slay.
My name is Naomi Dix. I have been a drag artist since 2014. I started originally off with the House of Coxx, which is the first and only drag house in Durham, BIPOC owned and operated. We started at the Pinhook, which is in Durham. It was started off by the drag mother, which is Vivica C. Cox, who is also the director of the LGBTQ Center of Durham, which is also happens to be the largest and most well-funded LGBTQ center in North Carolina, and is also ran by, again, my drag mother, who is the first Black trans woman to run an LGBTQ center in North Carolina as well. So our house is founded on social justice and, you know, creating and facilitating safe spaces. And that began in 2013, and I joined in 2014. I've been doing it ever since, and the house has grown. We're one of the only houses in North Carolina with the diversity that we have. That diversity includes whites, Afro-Latino, Asian, Middle Eastern, interracial, trans, queer, non-binary as well. And we're very proud of the foundation that we have not only built as the house, but we've also built a community here within Durham and a certain level of quality of drag, and not only of drag, but of queerness as well. And so we expect anyone that comes into Durham, North Carolina, to not only respect those standards that we have facilitated, but also to live up to those standards, because it's important to always have that representation as not just a house, but just as a queer house and BIPOC and owned and operated house as well. I will say that one of the things about the House of Coxx and about myself specifically is that one of our goals has always been to do shows in non-traditional queer spaces, because it opens the doors for people who may not feel comfortable going to queer spaces, people who are on a journey, who are not sure how they want to identify, if they identify as queer, if they identify as straight, if they identify as just an ally. They don't know, and that's their journey to go on. But it is our job, again, to facilitate that space for them. So a lot of the spaces that I do shows in are going to be in music venues, which is where we are now, music venues or bars or, you know, event spaces, venues that, again, are not specifically for the queer community, but we kind of kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, because we're not only educating the staff of the venue and allowing them to be able to be a part of something that is sacred to the queer community, which is a drag show, but we're also opening up the doors to people who are a little curious, who just want to know, what is a drag show? What is the queer community about? So that's always at the forefront of every event that I do. Every event that the House of Coxx does is just education. And not in a boring way, but in a way to educate them through art. And that's what we're doing. I am a full-time drag artist. I also have a full-time job with a nonprofit organization that is based out of Durham, North Carolina, that specifically helps and focuses on providing access to health care for the Latinx community and building that bridge between healthcare providers and patients, specifically to undocumented Latino and Latinx individuals living specifically in the South. So that's my day job, but I also do drag full-time as well, which means that I do shows, or I have shows, anywhere from 4 to 8 shows a week. Those are normally ranging from Thursday, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And that is normally anywhere from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. the next morning. So my schedule is very busy. I travel for drag as well, specifically within North Carolina, Charlotte, Raleigh, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, obviously Durham because it's my home base. And most of my shows that I host and produce are going to be in Chapel Hill and Carrboro. So when it comes to events that we do, or that I do specifically, that are outside of this beautiful bubble that we have in Durham, North Carolina, where a lot of things are accepted and the queer community has allies, 20, 15, 10 minutes outside of Durham, North Carolina, there are many spaces that are not that way. There are many cities and counties that don't feel that way. But within those counties, there is a huge community that goes unnoticed and doesn't have a voice, of queer people, of people who want to be allies to the queer community. And so my job as a drag artist is more than to look pretty all the time or to be in hair and makeup. I have a platform. And so why not use that platform, and why not use that access that I have to be able to give access to others to know that there's a community out there that represents them. And so when I go to places like Moore County, when I go to places like Winston-Salem, when I go to other places like Greensboro or smaller cities like Hillsborough, Pittsboro, things like that, or places like that, again, there are communities within those communities that need a voice to be able to feel comfortable, to know that there's something out there for them and that there's a community out there for them. But specifically when it comes to the youth within that community, because people or adults within that community have access, potentially have access. They have cars and find these queer spaces where they feel comfortable. But the youth don't have that access. They don't have that ability to be able to do that. And so instead of them trying to find it in other ways or through the internet, we bring that to them. And when we bring that to them, then that allows them to see that they have goals. And those goals are when they get to a certain age, when they have access, when they have transportation, that there's a community out there for them. And then also at the same time, when they see that I am using my platform to bring them community, then that inspires them to start planting seeds and planting the foundations in their own cities and their own towns so that they can let other youth their age see whatever your journey is, I am now that beacon of light for you, just as maybe Naomi was for me, I am now that beacon of light for you. In the beginning of 2021, I would say probably in February, a friend of a friend reached out to me who knew me relatively well, who was a part of the community, grew up in the community of Southern Pines, who started the Pride Committee that was in Southern Pines. And he reached out to me because he's been to many of my shows and knows the House of Coxx very well and knows what our agenda is, which is to create, facilitate, educate community, never to change community, but always to educate community. And so they had never had queer events in Southern Pines. They had never really had queer events in Moore County as a whole. So when he reached out to me, he asked me if I would be interested in starting a drag brunch in Southern Pines. I, of course, jumped on the opportunity because I was very excited. And anything for this particular person, I am right there to do it because he's community. He's a friend of mine. That was in the beginning of 2021. In June of 2021 was the first drag brunch that they had ever had in Southern Pines, where I decided to do one of my one-woman shows. And it was a 2-hour event. It was a huge sold-out crowds. It was in the middle of town, outside, beautiful day. I was so excited to just see new faces and to see youth and children and toddlers and their parents and their grandparents, everyone in the family. It was a family event. And everyone was so happy that they were having not only a queer artist, but also a queer artist of color. Because Southern Pines and Moore County is a very, 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 very much so a white, conservative space and county and city and town. And so it was just beautiful to be able to see that representation. And not only just see that representation, but also see representation through the lens of a queer person who is an Afro-Latinx person who is coming to your space to be able to educate you in knowing that there is a community right here, not only in Moore County, but in North Carolina as a large, space. Immediately after that event, the director who was a friend of mine, a director of Southern Pines, or Sand Hills Pride, I should say, reached out to me about doing another show. And so December of 2021, we did another show, same space. It was a brunch show. Everyone, their mother, their fathers, their grandparents, children, aunts, uncles, people who didn't even live in Southern Pines but lived in Moore County came to this event, another sold out event. It was a beautiful space, a beautiful time. But this time I actually brought my drag son, Dustin Reams, and my drag sister, Stormy Day, with me, because I wanted them to see that there is not only community out there, but there is a chosen family out there for us that don't have that representation or may not have people within our family that accept us for who we are. And so seeing that was beautiful for the community, and we had not only an amazing time, but we just kikied. We had a good time with like family and friends, and they wanted to see us back, and they were super excited about having us back. We had a third event, which was in July of 2022. Then we had another event that was 2 weeks after that show, which was actually in the Sunrise Theater. It was a showing of Paris is Burning, and it was a Q&A with me. And the reason that I did that and wanted to organize that event and direct that event is because drag is so much more important when you are able to understand the education of where drag comes from. And though I had organized all the brunch shows prior to that, that was in Southern Pines, I thought that it was really important for the community to understand that this is not something that we just woke up one day and decided, oh, we're going to be drag artists. Some of us did, and some of us didn't. But also, this has a history. And that history is coming from a long history of people that have fought to be in this space and have fought to have some sort of equality within a society that is taught to hate us. And in order for us to find that safe space, we created a space for ourselves. I just wanted the community to be able to see that in order for us to have a safe space, we had to create that safe space. And I wanted them to see that it wasn't just a safe space that I created, but that I am literally doing this off the backs of people who came before me who were even stronger than I was, that were able to create a safe space for not only just queer people, but queer people of color. And that drag comes from the ballroom scene, drag comes from the trans community, and that the trans community should never be forgotten when it comes to just drag in general. Which I was very shocked and surprised about how many trans youth actually live in Southern Pines, and how there is such a huge community of just trans youth there. And their parents were very excited to learn that, you know, those people who identify as trans, we as the queer and as the drag community always try to put them at the forefront, and that they will not be forgotten. They're forgotten through society all the time, they're forgotten through media, they're forgotten through history, but we as the queer community are always making sure that we're not only uplifting them, but we're putting them at the forefront, because a lot of what we do as drag artists literally stem from the trans community. It was then announced after that that we would be having a show December 3rd of 2022, and that it was going to be held in the Sunrise Theater. And that was the first actual queer event, but also first drag show that they had had in Sunrise Theater. So promotion began for the December 3rd show, and that began about 3 weeks prior to the event. And shortly after promotion started to go out, there was a lot of chatter within the extremist right-wing conservative groups, specifically one person that was living near the Moore County area, who didn't really like or appreciate that we as drag artists, but specifically myself, was coming to that area to do a show. One of the problems that they had with the show is that the show also at the same time promoted that youth were able to come. On the original flyer, what it said is that students got in for a discounted price of $20 and that anyone over a certain age or non-students got in for $45. Now, it wasn't necessarily specifying age, but obviously it was a part of what they had an issue with, knowing that people under the age of 18 were invited and were able to come. Because of that, that is when the threats started, specifically towards myself and towards the director, who now the director of Sandhills Pride is actually someone different. But that is when a lot of the threats started towards the director of Sandhills Pride, towards me specifically, and also towards Sunrise Theater. And also towards the businesses that were sponsors of the event. Emily Grace Rainey, who was sending out a lot of messages through social media, telling a lot of people within her community who agreed with her that she did not want this event to happen. And one thing that she said specifically, which really released a lot of this hatred and anger and a lot of the concern for our safety as the performers and as Sunrise, was a message that she put out on social media: "They are coming to our town, you know what to do." Well, then you have to ask the question, well, what does that mean? So that is when we decided, getting closer to the event, that we would go ahead and hire a security company to come out and also engage with police officers in that city to also come out and protect us. So we actually had snipers on the roof. We had police officers that were surrounding the building. And I also had my own security detail that were there to specifically protect myself and also protect the other performers as well, but specifically me, because a lot of the messages were directed towards myself and were directed towards the director of Sandhills Pride. They also took out a permit to be able to protest. Not only did they take out a permit, but there was also a church that took out a permit. And that church not only took out a permit to be able to protest, but they also sent in a letter to a lot of their community members, because this was not only a church, but it's also a school. They sent a letter to their community members and their parents, telling them to protest the event, telling them to not send their children to this event or not allow their children to come to this event, and that they were so upset that this event was in a certain amount of feet away from these children's homes and these children's, spaces as to where they played and businesses that they frequented. But all while this was happening, I just made sure that I tried to stay focused on what the actual task was, and that task was providing a space to a community that I had already built within Southern Pines and Moore County as a whole. It was a beautiful moment when I found out that there were a lot of people who were in support of me, in support of Sandhills Pride, and support of the community that I was bringing to the area.
How are we doing, Dix dolls?
They knew that my favorite color was pink.
Clearly, y'all got the memo that pink is my favorite color, so I appreciate
And that was a beautiful moment to be able to know that you always are going to have community. And to be completely honest, it wasn't only beautiful for me, but it was also beautiful for the youth that were living in that area, and also just the community as a whole, to know that they have people within their community who are ready to protect them and are letting them know that they have a community there to support them.
Count down from 3, and I want you to be so loud that the entire county hears you. Okay, including those who say they live here, but clearly they don't. And neither do I, honey, but I travel an hour and 21 minutes away just to come and see you.
It is not my position to visually let people know that I feel uncomfortable, because I believe that as a drag artist and as someone who is a part of the community and as a community leader, that my strength speaks volumes to the rest of the community. And the only way that I show that strength is by going there or going to a space and doing what it is that I'm supposed to do.
I would like to say a couple of things. I understand that I, as a drag artist, can be a little bit threatening to people. I understand that my tiny waist. I understand that my good wig. I understand that my good makeup may threaten some people. But I would like to say that I also can understand that everyone has the right to protest, whether they are right or wrong. It is not, wait a minute, it is not our job to change them. It is, however, our job to educate them. And I will say this because I grew up Christian. I understand that in Matthew chapter 28 verses 19 and 20, honey, it says to go therefore and make disciples. And guess what? That's what I'm doing too.
One of the things that really set a lot of this or added fuel to the fire is that through the threats that Sunrise Theater was receiving, they decided to change the flyer to the event to read as 18 plus. And as soon as that happened, then it sent off these alarms to the extreme right-wing conservatives that we told you they're trying to hide something. Emily Grace Rainey went on her social media and she said, we have won the fight, and now children are not allowed to the event. Our next goal is to get the show shut down. Well, clearly, the day of the show, they weren't getting anything shut down because we were there and we were ready to perform. But it hurt me to my heart to know that there were youth out there that were so happy about us coming and have been looking forward to this event. And now we're not able to be a part of this event that was a family-friendly event because people are taught to hate them. Like, these are children. These are children. And your message is that you're trying to protect the children, but yet you are literally depriving children of community art. And to me, that's completely contradicting what it is that you're saying your agenda is. And the reason for that is because your agenda is really not to protect the youth. Your agenda is simply to suppress and oppress queer and trans people.
You have every right to be angry. You have every right to be pissed off. You have every right to be disappointed that people are still in 2022 using children to hide their agenda. Which their agenda is simply that they don't like us.
And so the day of the event, I actually invited some youth who I knew specifically were upset that they were not able to actually come to the theater and stand outside with me so that I can chat with them. Gave them some gifts that are actually from my perfume line that hadn't been released yet, and give them some greeting cards and just have a conversation with them to let them know that the fight is never over. The fight is only going to get stronger, but it only gets stronger when we have people like yourself who are youth, who are here to, again, plant those seeds and also at the same time to educate their community when I cannot always be there to educate them myself. And that was beautiful to be able to spend time with the youth. And they were happy that we were there. They were sad that they would not be able to see us, but they knew that it was not going to be the last time that we were going to be in their space. The show started, and people started coming in. As people were coming in, there was also a peaceful protest that was happening outside. I wanted to make sure that I addressed the peaceful protest and the peaceful demonstration, but I also wanted to make sure that I addressed the opposing side as well. And the reason for that is because I wanted them to know, the opposing side, I wanted them to know that my job is not here to, again, change them, but my job is here to educate them, and that they have every right to feel the way that they do. I can't tell someone how they should feel. What I can do is at least educate them in knowing that the way that you handle yourself and the way that you handle yourself publicly and the things that you say and the words that you say actually do affect people.
Because we want to be inclusive of anyone and everyone, including those who still to this day claim to be Christian. Yeah. But it's okay, because half the men over there, that's what they told me when they binged me on Grindr.
And so the event finally started, and we were super excited, and it was a sold-out crowd, you know, of almost 370 people, I believe. And to know that in a small town like Southern Pines, that 370 people would show up to an event. I've done events with 2,500 people, but those are in larger cities. But to know that in such a small town that 370 people had the strength to be able to show up to an event that literally had so much hatred that was geared towards it. These are people that are putting their lives on the line, potentially, because we don't know. We had Proud Boys, we had people who identify as QAnon, we had KKK members, we had people who were in the military, clearly, who were threatening this event, but yet these people showed up despite that because they knew that not only did I need their support, but that those within their community needed their support. And we started off with a beautiful vocalist. I always start my shows off with a local, you know, person who is able to open up the event because I like to give a different experience than just your traditional drag show. I like to give something of a concert experience to people. And we started off with a local artist, vocalist, who is actually originally from Southern Pines, who is an award-winning, Grammy-nominated performer. And she started off with the event. She is a Black queer woman, and she sung beautifully for the crowd, really got us in a good mood. And then the drag portion started. I opened up the show with my dancers. We did a great job. My dancers, as usual, always have my back, and we did an amazing job, and the audience loved it. And then we transitioned into another drag artist. And by the third drag artist, it actually, in my show lighting cue list, the lights were actually supposed to go out at that time. And the lights went out, and I walked to the back of the dressing room, and my assistant, as well as my security guard, said to me, "I think the electricity just went out." And I said, "No, lighting cue list, that's all it is." And they're like, "No, we just went outside, and I think the lights went out." And just that quick, my security guard looked on the internet and saw that not only did the lights go out in Sunrise Theater, but they also went out in Southern Pines and Moore County. And that's when they let me know, I think we need to go ahead and re-examine the show at this point because we're not really sure where this is coming from and if this had anything to do specifically with the threats that were geared towards the drag show. So I went out to the stage, I addressed the crowd. I told them, take out your cell phones, let's illuminate the area, let's illuminate this beautiful theater that we're in, and let's go ahead and let's sing Beyonce's Halo, because I think everyone here knows at least some of the lyrics, and if they don't know all of them, then they at least know some of them to be able to join in. And so they did. And it was a beautiful moment to hear all 370 people not only have their cell phone lights out, but also be singing the song, and all of us doing it in unison, and just see that we were such a united front at that moment as a community. And we sung some other songs, and we chatted, and I made sure to go out into the audience and speak to the audience members just to make sure that they were in a headspace where they felt safe, and just to calm them, because it is my job as a drag artist to make sure that when I am doing a show, I don't only have the responsibility to provide entertainment, but I also have the responsibility of keeping my community safe in that space. And so in order to do that, I just wanted to make sure that I talked with a lot of people one-on-one, just to let them know that, listen, whether this has anything to do with us being here or not, you're here, I'm here, and we're in this together. So we kept that up for about 45 minutes. And then it was time for me to call the show, mainly because it was getting a little hot. We didn't have any air conditioning, obviously, at that moment. And I just wanted to ensure the safety of the community as well. So I went ahead and I let them know, listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I know this is not my fault. This is not your fault. But I just want to let you know that I am sorry that society is still here and is still making this so difficult for you and I. And that at this moment, whatever hatred you have, whatever uncomfortable energy you have, whatever sadness you have at this moment, the reason that people like me exist is so that you can put that anxiety on my shoulders, because I don't want you to have to carry it with you. And I then released them from the theater, and I told everyone goodbye one at a time, and made sure that I advised them to walk out to their cars in groups of people to ensure their safety. And we packed up and we left.
This is my rib bone right here. This is my headbeat right here. God give it to me.
The next morning we woke up, and I woke up, and my husband looked at me, and he looked at me again, and he said, I need you to really actually wake up for a moment. And I said, okay. And he said, I just want to let you know you're trending on Twitter. I said, interesting. And so I opened up my Twitter that I had actually downloaded 2 days before that event, because I am not really good at social media. That's the reason I normally have people run that for me. But I opened up my Twitter, and the event itself and myself, were trending, and the support in that moment that we were getting because of this event and because of what happened was confusing to me, because I didn't know, why are we getting support? Why is this trending? Why are news, media platforms talking about this? And come to find out, it is because that night, not only did the power go out, but it went out due to the fact that someone had shut out some of the main substations.
Moments ago, we got an update from officials in North Carolina after the FBI joined an investigation there into, quote, intentional and targeted attacks that left tens of thousands of North Carolinians without power.
It was a confusing time. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know why it was going on. We just knew that it happened. And it was something that was very interesting, obviously, to the media. But it was more interesting because there were 50,000 people without power. 50,000 people without power, dead in the middle of winter, when a lot of people who live in rural areas don't have access to be able to go to maybe the nearest town, or don't have access to be able to go to a larger city to, be in a safe space. We didn't know if this was geared towards the queer community. We didn't know if it was geared towards the drag show. And I myself had a feeling of guilt and anger, because I said, well, what did I do by making myself visible in this community? Was this my fault? And in that moment, I had a lot of different things running through my brain, but I did not have time to really think about it, because my thoughts were really more so on the community and keeping them safe, and what can I do as a drag artist and with my platform to make sure that I provided them with some sort of relief. Then come to find out that not only was it a power outage, but that Emily Grace Rainey put something on her social media saying that she knew why the power was out, which also shot a bunch of different, theories into the atmosphere of what did she have something to do with it. The next day, the sheriff's deputy went into a press conference and made a statement that he visited that young lady, speaking of Emily Grace Rainey, and we prayed together, and that she had nothing to do with this, and that, this issue has nothing to do with the queer community and has really nothing to do with the drag show, and that, the FBI is now involved and we will get down to the bottom of it. And so when those things started happening and we started seeing things that were happening through media, specifically with people in offices of power, and specifically when it came to people who were a part of the police force, it raised some eyebrows and it raised some questions. But it raised some questions to a larger issue, and that larger issue started to lead us down a path of understanding that this is not just something that affected, obviously, the drag show, but this is something that has been affecting that community for a very long time, and that people who have been put in positions of power have been living off of this hate that they have had for us as a community, not only as a queer community, but as a community of color, as a community of a marginalized community, and that fascism and white supremacy is still at the forefront of our society, and that at the end of the day, they are still trying to suppress and oppress who we are as a community of people. And that in itself led down a huge investigation, and a lot of people within the area, specifically, obviously within Moore County and North Carolina as a whole, that we have a lot of work to do, and that it is not safe for myself, it is not safe for anyone, whether they are white, whether they are Latino, whether they are Afro-Latino, whether they are Indian, whether they are, Middle Eastern, Asian. They are not safe because this is a society that is still to this day, very, very well grounded in fascism. And that is something that we as a community cannot forget, because if we are a part of a marginalized community, if we are not agreeing with them, which is exactly what fascism is, then we are on the outside of that and we are not safe. Parents create a home for their family and for their children. And it is everyone's goal, and it is the American dream. It is a dream of anyone, whether American or not, to create a home, because a home provides some sort of security. It provides some sort of space where you feel safe. But specifically when it comes to a family that has children, every parent's dream is to have children and to provide a life for them that was better than their own. And that is what we, as queer people, have continuously done throughout history and over time, mainly because a lot of our own families don't accept who we are. So we have chosen family out there. And a part of that chosen family is building a home for ourselves. That is where drag houses come from. That is where the ballroom scene comes from. The ballroom scene is founded on the fact that there were people who did not really identify as drag artists, but they identified as an artist in a different way, but in a way that their own biological families did not accept them. And so instead of going down a road of feeling as though, you had to get either into sex work or drugs, people founded, or our people, queer people, founded the ballroom scene to be able to provide a space to young people who needed to be able to express their artistic sides and express themselves as queer people, and to be able to find their own journeys, and to be able to feel safe finding their own journeys, and to be able to be in a space that didn't make them feel as though they were not wanted and that they didn't have a voice. And so because of that foundation and because of what we have continuously done throughout the history or throughout the queer history, and as my own house, the House of Coxx, has done, it hurts us to know that there is an agenda to stop the future of queerness. It would be just like if a parent had a home and someone broke into the home, stole memories, stole pictures, stole family heirlooms, and threatened them and their family. That would make that parent, that would make that household feel uneasy, because they have put so much love and so much energy over the years into this home and to build this home. They've put so much love into their children to make sure that their children felt safe. And then to all of a sudden one day have that torn away from them, that not only makes them feel mad and angry, it makes them feel, well, what was this all for? Why did I do this if there is no protection for me and my family? It makes them question the world that we live in. It makes them question society. It makes them question themselves. It makes them question their family, because that is what happens when someone rips away your security. And in that moment of what happened in Moore County, it ripped away not only my security, but it ripped away the security of the queer community locally as well, because you came into our home that we have built, and you're welcome to come into our home anytime, as long as you respect it. But when you disrespect that by taking or attempting to take something away from us, it makes us feel unsafe, and it makes us have to question who we are as people. It makes us have to question society, and it makes us realize that we have never been in a safe space. And now we have to reevaluate those spaces that we've created. Because now, me as a drag artist, I have to now think about when I go into a venue, I not only am talking to the venue space, I'm not only producing and organizing and directing the show, I am now having to provide that venue and educate that venue in knowing that we, as a queer show and production, now need security. And so I look at everyone else within my community as my family, as my children. When I look at the youth, I look at them as my children, and now I have to protect them. And I'm at a loss at how to protect them, because I can hire security, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that security understands how to handle security when it comes to queer people. Because the way that you handle security for a concert full of cisgender and straight people is not the same type of security that you can offer when it comes to the queer community. You have to reevaluate that. And so we have to re-educate ourselves, we have to re-educate venues, we have to re-educate the community, we have to now re-educate police, we have to re-educate the city, we have to now re-educate the state, we now have to re-educate the United States, and we now have to re-educate media, and how media covers this, and how media is there to not only cover this, but also can also offer some sort of education and security themselves in how they cover these events and how they cover these matters of hate that is geared towards the trans community and the queer community as a whole. One thing I do want to say is that at the end of the day, this is not about drag artists. It never has been about drag artists. What it has to do with, the real hate here, is their hatred and their misunderstanding and their lack of education when it comes to the difference between drag and transness. A lot of people don't understand, and they don't want to understand, that a trans person happens to be a drag artist, and a drag artist happens to be a trans person. But being a drag artist is a choice that we make, but being trans is not a choice. That is who we are, that is who they are. And so that's at the forefront of really understanding where this is coming from. There has always been a hate when it comes to just trans people in general. And that is something that the media has done a horrible job at covering, that trans lives and trans bodies have always been at the forefront of hate, have always been at the forefront of physical harm, and that the media and that the city and that the state and that our political leaders have done nothing to protect these trans people. If it wasn't for trans people, a lot of queer spaces wouldn't exist. If it wasn't for queer people, a lot of, or I should say drag artists, a lot of these spaces wouldn't exist when it comes to queer clubs or when it comes to safe spaces for queer community. If it wasn't for trans and drag artists, those things would not exist. But those things are two separate things: transness and drag queens and kings and artists. And so when you understand where the actual hatred is coming from, which it is geared towards the trans community, then it can kind of help you understand the fact that their lack of trying to educate themselves in knowing the difference between both is clearly their lack of trying to understand the queer community as a whole. Because if they wanted to understand who we are, then they would clearly see that, again, transness and drag artists are two separate things. When it comes to the political climate and how they seem to be on the rise when it comes to their hatred towards the queer community, then we kind of have this period of quietness and we really don't hear anything. And then all of a sudden, more county situations happen and Club Q happens and Pulse nightclub happens and all of these things. And people are like, well, we don't really hear anything. And like all of a sudden, you know, we hear something and there's this like, there's this just huge jump in the hatred towards the queer community. I always say to people all the time, that is not correct. There has always been the same hatred when it comes to the queer community. It has never slowed down. It has never been on the rise. It has always been in the same space, which is they hate us no matter what. The difference is that the media controls what you hear and what you don't hear. And so when the media has a story, something like a Club Q or something like a Moore County, then they cover that. They cover it as long as they are in the heat of it. But as soon as people are, you know, done with the story, have moved on, there's a bigger and better story for the media to cover, then they cover that story. That is how the media works. They are looking for a storyline. And so while all of these other things are happening, there is still hatred, continuous hatred for the queer community. It has never stopped, it has never wavered, it has never calmed down, it has never been on the rise, it has always been the same. People as a whole, people as citizens, people as, you know, people living in different states and countries have now forgotten about what is happening to the queer community because it's not being covered by the news. And so now people think that anything having to do with the queer community is kind of on a little bit of a rest, right? But I, as a queer person, am very aware that that is untrue. I see it every single day. I'm providing a safe space for people. That's my empathy. Like, as simple as that is, I'm providing a safe space. I made a comment on social media the other day that if it was not for trans people, if it was not for drag artists, gay people would still be in the basement of a club doing things that made them feel uncomfortable, but that they did not know were uncomfortable because that was the only examples that they had, or that was the only access to something that they had. If it was not for people like myself, if it was not for trans people, gay people would still be at home, married to someone that they did not want to be married to, having children with someone that they did not want to have children with, and living a life that they did not want to live. If it wasn't for trans and drag people, a lot of these people would not even exist. Why? Because these people would still be taking their lives, because these people are still taking their lives. So my empathy, and the empathy through drag, and the empathy through just artistry in general, queer artistry, is through this safe space that we provide, whether we are drag artists, whether we are trans people who happen to be a trans singer, whether we happen to be a trans actor, whether we happen to be an artist who does beautiful paintings and we are a queer person, we are providing representation. And that love that we have transcends through the space that we create for people to be able to see that representation. Anyone that is not directly impacted by queer people on a day-to-day basis, that is untrue. Because you are impacted by any sort of marginalized community, you are impacted by anyone that is not what society has told us is normal. As I said, you are impacted by the clothes that you wear, by the hairstyles that you have, by what you watch on television, how you cook your food, when you go to the grocery store. You are impacted by culture every single day. Whether you have something directly dealing with something specifically when it comes to a certain type of culture, doesn't matter. You're affected by it every single day, by literally walking outside, by the buildings that we see outside. How do you know those buildings were not created by a queer person? How do you know that they weren't built by a person of color? Clearly, we know that the fashion business is built on the backs of queer people. So clearly, the threads that you are wearing, you are impacted by queerism. You are impacted by the queerness that we call this gay community. You are impacted by that. But I always say, even though you may not feel that you are impacted, and even though you may not understand who queer people are, because again, it is not my job to try to tell you who queer people are, that is something that you have to come to go through a journey to understand yourself. That is your responsibility, that is not mine. I lead by example, and that is it. So when I get on camera, when I speak to people, how I speak to them, how I engage with them in conversation, I want them to see that queer people are nothing to be scared of. That is my education to them. But if they are in that middle part of not really being allies, but also not understanding and not knowing if whether they agree or disagree, I always say to people, what if you had a child who came out as queer? What would your response be? Would your response be to hate them? Would your response be to disagree with them? Well, you might say, oh, well, I might disagree with them. And I would say, okay, well, what if your child was queer and you disagreed with them and they went down a road of trying to find their own journey because they had no sort of representation and they had no way of knowing if anyone supported them because you don't support them? What if that queer person was walking down the street one day and they were pulled in an alley, raped, and killed? Would you hate queer people? Would you hate your child and say, well, that was their fault because they were queer? No, you would be absolutely torn up inside. If your husband or your wife or your cousin or your daughter or your son or your uncle or your aunt or your mother or your father, people come out as queer no matter what age they are. If they came out as queer and something terrible happened to them, how would you respond to that? Would you respond to it by saying, well, they deserved it because they were queer? No. You would say, why? They were just human. And a lot of people always say, you know what? Yeah, I would say that they were just human. Why would this happen to them? And I'm saying, right. So the next time that you see something queer and you don't know whether or not you support it, I always want you to think of that queer person as a body that is disposable for people who don't like them. Because you would never want anyone to be hurt or killed no matter how they identify. Whether they're white, whether they're black, whether they're queer, whether they're not. You as a human being, unless you are a horrible human being, would not want something bad to happen to them. And if you, for that moment, want to not see a queer person hurt or killed, then you have to re-examine who you are as a person and say, then I do support them. Now, I don't know about Emily Grace Rainey. She doesn't clearly care, but we're not talking about her. We're talking about people as a whole. And at the end of the day, I think people are pretty good people. I think people are only bad because of what they're taught. I think that people are only uneducated because of their lack of education and their lack of understanding and what society is telling them that they should think. But at the end of the day, I think that the majority of people are pretty good people. But it's not up to me to be able to tell them what they should and should not believe in. That has to be something that they do themselves. And so when it comes to what I think that we need from them, I don't think from that type of group of people, I don't think we need anything from them. But we need to at least have them have some sort of compassion for just human beings in general. And if they have that compassion, then they understand, or at least they should understand, that queer people are no different than them. The only difference is what society has told them is different. That's the beautiful thing about art, is it's a journey that we're always going on, and we have pit stops along the way. And some of those pit stops are profound pit stops, and some of those pit stops are a moment for us to reevaluate who we are as artists, so that we can continue to be able to be a force to reckon with when it comes to our community. But those journeys will always take us in different directions. And right now, our journey as drag artists should not be just to sit back and receive tips at a show. We have so much more to do. And if this was not as important as it was 5 years ago, it is now important at this moment, because we have so many people that are on our side, but we have so many people that are against us. And so right now my job is, and I'm not saying that it'll be like this in 5 years, I don't know, but my job is to sit here and have a conversation with people who don't understand who we are as drag artists, who don't understand who we are as queer people, and to, again, as I said before, not change them, but just to educate them through letting them know how society looks at us, what we are doing as drag artists, and through the words that are coming out of my mouth to explain to you that I am just a person who happens to be an artist, who happens to be taking on a role as a drag artist to provide and facilitate safe space for my community and for the community as a whole, and as for allies to the community as well. What I will say is that for people that, whether they are allies or not, or people who are stuck in limbo as to how they are, the only thing that I will say that comes off the top of my head is, if there is something that you may want to do, or something that we may need as a community, as queer people, as people of color, is to allow us to have a voice to speak. You don't have to film us. You don't have to talk to us. But if we are voicing our opinions on media, if we are voicing our opinions outside by protesting, if we are voicing our opinions at your job, it is not your job to tell us whether we are right or wrong, because you don't know what is right and what is wrong. Of course we know things like murder, and of course we know things like killing people or hurting people or things like that. Those things, of course, are wrong. But allowing us to have that space, and allowing us to not only have that space, but realizing that we have the right to take up space, is how you can help us. Plain and simple. We have the right to take space. I have the right to take space. I, as a person of color, I, as a queer person, I, as a drag artist, have the right to take up space. No matter how you look at it, everything with the queer community leads back to drag artists and leads back to trans people. And so we have a power, the same power that a politician has, we have within our own community. And it is up to us how we decide to use that power. Unfortunately, politicians have a habit of misusing their power. But we are smart enough to know that we have a power and we will not misuse it, but we will use it to keep our community safe. Whether that is us simply speaking out, whether that is me sitting here speaking to you all today, that is how we use our power, and we will continuously use our power whether people want to listen to us or not.